Hello, Bill. Welcome back.
Hi, Linda. It's great to be back. I had a wonderful time in Brazil, and I want to shout out to all our friends at Economia Underground podcast, who constitute probably both of our listeners in Brazil.
And you were working with graduate students, giving a keynote at a conference.
Yes, and at the founding of a new Latin American Research Association for Original Institutional Economics.
Well, fantastic. Yeah. And meeting with some highly placed people.
Yes, talking about things they probably don't want on this podcast.
That's why I'm not going to mention it. But still, you are a famous person.
Only in Brazil.
Okay, it's good enough. Good enough. Okay, today we are going to be discussing. That was an important Freudian slip. Yes. The new person who's supposed to be in charge of our intelligence. I say that advisedly. And then I'm going to be speaking some more about the two-faced owner of OpenAI, Mr. Altman, and the gutting of 60 Minutes on CBS. Bill has some more grim news about the economy. We're going to ask, where's Keene? He's been missing for some time. I understand you're not thrilled with the director of, should I call it, intelligence?
Yeah, you probably shouldn't. We have a new acting director of unintelligence. Tulsi Gabbard has been replaced as Director of National Intelligence by the current head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Bill Pulte, elevating a real estate sign. I love that. That's from AP. Parenthetically, that's another real estate developer who comes from a wealthy family of similar swindlers. Sound familiar? Without any clear national security credentials, which, by the way, the authorizing legislation requires of the person in that position. Experience, indeed. So here's the person appointed to this key post as the U.S. remains at war with Iran. This is the same piece of poop that ginned up the mortgage fraud charges against Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook and other Trump opponents. He is a staunch ally with regard to Trump's attempt to intimidate Jerome Powell and bring the Federal Reserve Board under his control. Now, this would ordinarily just be another example of Trump's incompetence by appointing an incompetent loyalist to important positions in government. However, the Director of National Intelligence is the clearinghouse, so to speak, that directs and determines our many different intelligence agencies' collections of data and analysis. They distill all this information for a daily briefing for, guess who? Yes, incompetence Trump.
Oh, a new word. Perhaps you'd explain it to us.
Well, it's a combination of incompetent POTUS, but that's hard to say. But incompetence Trump sounds good. It's like a transformer, certainly a Decepticon. Thus, the director must understand all the various types of intelligence gathered, how it is evaluated, how it is shared, and who gets access. Our new Director of National Intelligence is very well informed on rising mortgage interest rates and declining home purchases. We are again screwed. It's not like we are involved in difficult negotiations with allies and adversaries or at war with just about everyone, so what could go wrong, as Senator Elizabeth Warren asked? Even congressional Republicans are concerned about this buffoonery. This is really dangerous.
This is terrible, but did he go through the congressional hearings?
He's acting director, so he doesn't have to.
Oh.
Yeah.
That old scam.
This position was created because all of the intelligence agencies were not communicating with one another.
Yeah.
This particularly became important after 9/11, and all of these agencies, and there are many of them that collect intelligence, do so in different ways. Some use people, some use signal intelligence. They're all different, and they all have different focuses. For example, naval intelligence is really important, having to do with the safety of shipping in the world. If the Director of Intelligence had talked to naval intelligence and gone to Trump, they would have probably mentioned the Straits of Hormuz. I think it would come up, and those would be the people who currently know if it's mined. That's what they do. Now we have a guy who wants to talk about condo conversions. I mean, the lack of diplomatic experience, the lack of experience in the intelligence community could be fatal for
I think
lots of people.
I think it has been, because the follow-up on Tulsi Gabbard being shown the door, she was shut out of the discussions about starting the war with Iran. She didn't think it was a very good idea. They didn't want to hear it from her. So, yeah, it's already cost a lot, and it's not going to get better with this clown.
Well, the other thing, too, is the people in these agencies, first of all, they're smart, and they know what they're doing, but they really don't like interacting with one another. They don't have a good history with that. So the notion that this intelligence be coordinated by someone who, with experience, who could oversee the sort of interdepartmental differences of opinion and how to weigh them, is absolutely crucial to our safety.
I thought we learned that at 9/11.
Yeah, intelligence failures can often be very costly.
Yeah.
If the right hand's not talking to the left hand, and they know about this, and they know the other one knows about this, and they don't talk, then the person telling the president is uninformed. And the president is uninformed. Now, in this particular case, it probably doesn't make any friggin' difference if Trump's uninformed. He doesn't listen to anybody anyway. So, in some sense, we aren't right now any worse off than we were for the last 6 months. But this is an important job, and competence sometimes matters. Obviously, not in the office of the president, but in other parts of the government. So this is bad.
It's very bad news.
Yeah. So let's go on to something cheery. What are the corporate criminals in the world doing now?
Well,
Our billionaire buddies.
yeah, last time I introduced the two-faced Mr. Altman, who I said could charm birds out of the trees. He's the head of OpenAI, which started as a nonprofit, but now it's going to go profit. And Musk is very angry at Altman, and Altman seems to be looking for as much money and power as he can get from AI.
Great.
And so now I'm going to talk about the political side of what Altman's been doing to accrue power to himself.
Okay.
In 2023, he testified before Congress that he really favored regulation of AI because it could be so dangerous.
Yeah, students cheating
And he is
online gambling. Yeah, it's
and
awful.
he is so credible that, Congress believed it. So then Congress set about thinking that, maybe there should be some controls. Of course, nothing happened with that. But the EU, the European Union, did try to pass legislation in 2022 and 23, which Altman's outfit successfully lobbied to dilute. So what passed was something much more palatable to Mr. I really do want regulations. And this is one that really sends chills down my spine. In 2024, the California state legislature introduced a bill requiring safety testing on all AI models. Now, remember from last time, safety in this context means that the models do not act out of any other motive excepting doing good things for humanity. Now, that's not a good definition of anything, I don't think, but
Nope.
the point was that they wanted to prevent it from going rogue. Well, OpenAI not only opposed this legislation, but according to a legislative aide at the time, quote, I would say that over the course of the year, we saw increasingly cunning, deceptive behavior from OpenAI. Now, the legislation passed, but the governor, Newsom, vetoed it. Now, I find that disturbing on many levels, but I want to remind everybody that I'm really drawing here upon a very important article in the April 13th New Yorker that did a very extensive investigation of Altman. But Newsom's trying to line himself up for a run for the presidency. And he's trying to line California up for being a real, hub for technology innovation. So he vetoed something that his own legislature wanted.
I have a question that I'd like us to think about. Do you think that that was a purely political decision in the sense that he knows that AI money would be against a candidate who supported regulation? And it isn't the particular legislation, it's any legislation that seems to be the problem. Because the harms they're talking about, we haven't imagined yet because we haven't experienced them yet. Oh, yeah, they can be deceptive, they can confuse people, they can, I get that. But, most of what we've heard about the dangers of AI comes from fictional accounts because it doesn't work yet, in any serious way.
I think that's a very good supposition. Right now, congressional candidates who favor legislation are opposed by a PAC called Leading the Future. And it's devoted to scuttling AI regulation. One of the leading contributors is Greg Brockman, who is Altman's software engineer and very much involved in running the company. And he has committed $50 million to this PAC. So, yeah, I think that was certainly in the back of Newsom's mind. Legislators seeking to reintroduce the bill in California have been subpoenaed by OpenAI because they're purportedly seeking evidence that these legislators are in collusion with Musk. So it's an intimidation campaign.
Yeah, certainly. And you said they're subpoenaing for what? Is this part of the Musk trial with Altman, or?
Yeah, this is part of the stupid titans at war.
Yeah.
As far as Altman's political affiliations, he's a longtime supporter of Democrats. And Altman told Biden when he was president, that Altman approved Biden's lengthy executive order requiring safety tests and guardrails for AI. So he's currying favor with Biden. But then he shifted support to Trump, who rescinded Biden's executive order on his first day back in office. Biden also placed export restrictions on sensitive technology, and Trump rescinded this. So there's Altman seemingly supporting regulation and constraints on exports, but not really. He is now a Trump favorite. On Trump's second day in office, he announced a data center building project that was going to develop AI. The plan was developed by OpenAI and included data centers in the Gulf.
Okay, data centers. Let's speculate about what Trump thought he was doing. He was looking at an executive order to create his very own presidential data center library. And when they said Gulf, he thought they said golf.
I'm going to accept that. I'm not going to try to do any research on it. I'm just going to stipulate to it.
This just gets so ridiculous.
Okay, now this takes us to the cost and who the investors are, which we began to discuss last time. Remember, the race is on to develop artificial general intelligence, which is far more complex than what they now call simple AI, which is a little mind-boggling. But this is the kind of idea that if you had enough capacity, you could develop a general intelligence model that would generate new AI models. It would spawn new inventions and new projects. And so,
You know, it turns out that there are hundreds of millions of those walking around the planet. They're in our heads.
yeah, they're called people. I know.
Yeah.
Well,
And you know what? All we need is a little beer and pizza, and we operate just fine. No electricity involved.
well, the issue then for cost is that the more data and computing power is needed to train the models, the smarter they seem to get. This is what Altman understands. And we discussed last time he doesn't have a strong grasp on any of this.
Yeah.
So then he thought, well, what we need is more computing power and the electricity to run it. So OpenAI in its latest round raised $120 billion, the largest private fund in history, and a sum 4 times larger than the biggest IPO. So, who has the kinds of discretionary funds of hundreds of billions of dollars per year to fund this dream, this race?
Of course, the Department of Defense spends money like that.
Well, yes, one source would be the United States government.
Yeah.
Okay. 4 or 5 of the biggest tech companies would have this kind of law. But here's the important one for Altman: the Saudis and the Emirates. So Altman first cultivated bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, but he had to back off when, under Salman's evidently orders, or at least on his watch, Khashoggi was killed and dismembered. So Altman regarded that as a setback. It didn't mean he would never deal with Saudis, but at the time, he turned his attention elsewhere. In 2023, he decided to create a company. Oh, he must have sat up all night thinking of this name, called Chipco. And his plan was that the Gulf states would provide tens of billions of dollars for the construction of huge microchip foundries and data centers, some to be in the Middle East, okay? And the board for OpenAI knew none of this.
Nice.
And this is what he pitched to Trump.
Okay.
And he had Trump sign that executive order telling Trump, you go ahead and do that and take all the credit for it. You don't need to mention my name. So that's how that happened. Altman has proposed Chipco as a joint entity funded by an investment of $5 to $8 trillion. Now, this is where I began to get skeptical about this plan.
Yeah.
That there's too muchness here for it to breed anything, excepting, maybe some more money for him. It's entirely hypothetical. It's entirely hypothetical. It requires trillions and trillions of dollars, lots of energy, and then what?
And then what?
Yeah. Well, there are national security concerns. So your friend, the real estate developer, will probably be, losing sleep over this, right?
I think the mortgage interest rate's going to worry him more. That's more in his wheelhouse.
Well, the national security concerns begin and end with the notion that AI capacity may replace oil and uranium in importance to the national geopolitical situation. Mm-hmm. National security officials are not happy about basing AI infrastructure in Gulf autocracies.
Yeah.
They see some issues there.
The technical issues actually seem kind of daunting. It's not like these places are full of water. They're cooling these places. I mean, these data centers run hot.
I know. Yeah.
And it's already hot there.
Yes, I know.
This is crazy.
Desalination, my friend.
Oh, that's efficient.
Well, I'm telling you, they've got them because every time Iran shoots off some missiles, everybody gets worried that it'll hit a desalination plant.
Right, but that's for human consumption, not for cooling.
Do you
computing
understand
centers.
why I'm skeptical?
Yeah, the scale of this is too big and too unreasonable.
Well,
and the other thing is people who make these kind of investments expect a profit. Well, what's a 10% rate of return on $5 trillion? What are they going to sell me that they're going to get that much money for? Hell, that's greater than GDP most years.
the other problem is that the United Arab Emirates infrastructure depends on hardware from Huawei, which, as we all know, is a Chinese tech giant that's linked to the Chinese government. And in response to the support from China, the UAE has reportedly leaked American technology to Beijing in the past. So do we want them as partners?
Doesn't really seem to matter.
Yeah, we have not going to have much to do with it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Iran has bombed American data centers in Bahrain and the United Emirates. In the end, there would be nothing to prevent a Gulf state from just commandeering American data centers.
Yeah.
So who cares if we build them there? They could take them over. So it just, as a plan, it seems flawed. Also, the levels of corruption here are phenomenal. Just phenomenal, because the Jared Kushner has been involved in the UAE, and the amount of money flowing from in the form of gifts to Altman, flashy cars. He seems to like to drive around in flashy cars.
If I were to step back from this a moment and reflect on how much of our efforts in the United States are on transferring money from one place to another for fee, if you think about just passing this money around, the kind of fees that would generate, which are usually a percentage of the amount that's being transferred, would be enormous. It doesn't matter if any of it's ever spent. In other words, the financial sector could make a ton of money, even if this all goes down the toilet.
Just by moving the money?
Sure. These transactions, you have to pay for them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's usually based on how much you're trying to move. Well, move $5 trillion. What are you going to take? 1/10 of 1% and retire to owning a moon? I mean, the amount of money for something that they don't have a definitive product for, that, they've hired a bunch of screenwriters for science fiction movies to come up with. This is serious snake oil here.
That's what I've concluded. And
it's dangerous snake oil, to be sure.
Yeah, but I thought last time you hit the nail on the head when you said, look, it isn't a question of whether they're going to make a profit that's leading investors and members of the board of trustees to go along with this guy. It's that it requires tremendous amounts of money to keep it going.
Yeah.
And they want that monetary flow coming into OpenAI.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's, next time, we'll look at the Pentagon.
Next generation, this is going to be your mess to clean up.
That's right.
We gave you pollution. You're going to get this.
Well, we got the Cold War.
Yeah,
that was
fun.
our lucky inheritance. Yeah. Well, now that I've cheered everybody up with this happy clappy news, tell us, Bill, has the economy turned around?
Okay. We are still screwed. Just looking at inflation since the war, since Trump doesn't want to take any credit for this, the producer price index has risen 6% since the war began in April.
And what's the producer price index?
That's the companies that are buying things for production purposes. The prices of their inputs have gone up 6%.
Oh, Lord.
That's like twice the rate of the other inflation. Consumer price index has risen to 3.8% in the same period. You remember we were talking about how bad 2.3 was, right? Gas prices have soared, which has a disproportionate impact on lower income families. They actually spend more on energy as a percentage of their total expenditures than wealthy people do. All right. Consumption expenditures by household could be up because of the inflation rather than any new purchasing power. In other words, people are spending more because they have to get the same amount of
so
stuff
it's
they
not
used to.
it's not a sign of consumer optimism, is
Right.
what you're
It's
saying.
just stuff got more expensive.
Yes.
The home mortgage situation is grim. Home mortgages are now averaging at 6.5%. And this means buying a house has gotten significantly more expensive. Now, here's the thing. When people buy a house, the price of the house isn't what they're looking at. It's the monthly mortgage payment.
Yes.
And that 6.5% goes right into that monthly mortgage payment. So it really makes it more expensive. And as a result, fewer houses are being sold. Young people can't buy houses at all because it's too expensive. So that's grim. Employment has remained steady as it has throughout this entire fiasco. And now back to our friends, the bonds. Yields on 30-year bonds are up to 5.18%. Okay? That means that bond resale prices are lower. Remember, the yield is how much they're giving up on the face value of the bond in terms of the interest.
I would like to tell you something.
Yeah.
You have explained this to me so many times. And every time my brain just goes buzz. And I think, okay, I got it now. Mm-hmm. Okay, so wait. Let me clarify.
Okay.
I am the head of a large financial house of some kind. You are the United States government selling treasuries.
Right.
You say we've got a great big load of treasuries for $10,000.
Yeah, that's reasonable, 10 or more, but yes.
Yeah. And so I come in and I say, I'd like to buy your $10,000 treasury notes.
Right.
What interest rate are you offering?
They tell you an interest rate. There's supposedly an auction.
That's what I remember. There's
Right,
an auction.
right.
Yeah.
And these are regular purchasers of wholesale bonds, so they kind of know the drill and they know what they have to buy when they get there. So there's a negotiation over the interest rate, and that interest rate will be what we call a coupon rate. So if you buy it, that's the interest you'll receive on your $10,000.
Okay.
Okay, but these bonds get sold in a resale market.
I now turn around to sell those.
Right. Now, if the current interest rate is higher than the interest rate on your bond, you would have to discount the bond
right.
for me to buy it from you.
Yes.
Okay. The yield is what that difference is. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Oh, and if you think you're confused, the article I got this from had it wrong. So, they're talking about as yields go up, prices go up. No, it's bond prices move inversely with prices, not bond yields do.
And who was the brilliant editor of this?
It was the New York Times financial page. The New York Times financial page really messed this up.
Okay.
The editor hasn't been listening to the podcast. Okay. This is the highest yield since the great financial crisis that almost destroyed the world in 2007. And bond values tanked then also. Bond prices generally move inversely with consumer and producer prices. So higher yields indicate that bondholders are anticipating price increases, otherwise known as inflation, going forward. And these are 30-year bonds, right? These are stable. This means they're making a long-term bet on inflation.
Okay.
Right. So this is a sign that there's real concern in the financial markets with what's going on. Now, some of it's stupid, but some of it is a reflection of instability. There's no chance that the United States government's going to default on its bonds because it can always just print the money to pay the interest on the bonds or issue new bonds to replace old bonds. It's all about accounting. It's not about real expenditures. But there is the perception that the interest on this could overwhelm GDP. There's a lot of bond prophecy that affects financial markets by people who don't really understand what's going on.
So
but
they
think
get nervous.
Do.
They get nervous about it?
Yeah, essentially. And sometimes, sometimes, and the concern of governments is if they are running deficits that are forcing them to sell more government bonds, that people will be worried that the government is going to default, and therefore they will demand higher interest rates. And so the annual interest rate will become a huge portion of the federal budget each year, crowding out any spending on anything else.
Oh, that's what they're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
And so when these guys get mad, they sort of attack the bonds, so to speak.
Whose guys get mad and attack?
There are people who are bond vigilantes.
Yes.
They watch the bond market and they take advantage of the perception of crises by deepening the crises. You can always bet both sides of a transaction.
Okay, so I'm looking to make profits off of bonds.
Mm-hmm.
The bond market is jittery, and I decide to bet on inflation.
Yeah.
So I start buying bonds at the lower interest rate.
People start making bids for bonds at very low interest rates. These are not done by individuals mostly.
Right. Yeah, I
These
get
are usually
that.
done by big companies that transfer bonds for individuals.
Right.
They're huge bond funds, and they have a vested interest in the bonds paying high rates of return for their customers. It's just like a mutual fund for stocks, but they're huge, and they move markets. The volume they do changes the market price, so they can take actions that can make it real difficult for the government if the government pretends like it's constrained. And the United States government is not constrained because we have a sovereign currency. All right, the U.S. dollar is a legal tender. And it's created by acts of Congress.
Yes.
Right. So when Congress approves an appropriation, that act creates the money. Boom, the Federal Reserve credits the Treasury's account with that amount of money. Now, we have this myth that the government budget should be run like our household, so that income comes in and that's what you can spend. Well, the income that comes in for the government is taxes or people buying bonds. But they buy more bonds when the taxes don't cover it. They sell more bonds when tax revenues don't pay for the entire annual federal budget. They don't need to do this. This is not required in our system. It is a convention in Congress called PAYGO, and it's because nobody trusts the government not to spend too much money. So they put this phony system in place, and economists have played along with this because nobody trusts the government not to just spend money into an inflationary nightmare. All you have to do is determine what resources you have, make sure you don't spend money on more than the resources you have, and you won't create inflation. That would require us electing adults to Congress, and we don't have a great track record with that. So this is kind of an artificial constraint that we put there, but it seems to imply that the U.S., if tax revenues couldn't cover the interest on the bonds, that somehow the government would default. But in the Constitution, the government's charged with protecting the full faith and credit of the United States, which is permission to. That's where that whole scam about the federal government, the Treasury minting $1 trillion coin. Mm-hmm. The Treasury currently isn't authorized to print money, but they still can make coins. So if they put $1 trillion coin, they could deposit it in their Fed account, and that would just create the money, and then they could pay all their bills. I mean, this is accounting. The monetary economy and the real economy are connected, but they're not the same thing.
It's a little bit more like a religion.
Oh, it's a lot like a religion. In fact, in an email, Durkheim's elementary forms religious life after he's described all these totemic religions. He has a footnote that says, it looks like economics is the totemic religion of our day. Basically land, labor, capital, workers, they're all totems that we pretend to use to describe the economy.
Right.
Isn't this fun?
I do enjoy it. I'm trying to remember why can't I do names? The anthropologist in the South Pacific.
Bronislaw Malinowski in Argonauts of the Western Pacific.
He was the one who wrote this brilliant analysis of how the different groups within the island archipelago trade things like cowrie shells, beads.
Arm shells and necklaces.
Exactly.
In the Kula ring. Let's move this along. We only got 40 minutes here.
And wasn't that just like the crown jewels?
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's a really brilliant analysis. It's also hilarious satire in its own, strategically written way, so it sounds objective.
So, let's see. That was the economy. You want to do one of your shorties?
Yeah, okay. It's my turn to, raise some issues with you. And this has to do with really excellent reporting by Oliver Darcy, and it has to do with the continuing murdering, as somebody very important had to say, of CBS, and that's Scott Pelley. Now, when we last left this, Bari Weiss had been named to this new position of taking over. She was clearly there because the Ellisons had just bought CBS along with a lot of other holdings, and they wanted approval from Trump, and now they want approval from an even bigger takeover. So anyhow, she's I think she's a grifter, frankly. She knows nothing about the news end of things. She had a very popular podcast. So everybody's been waiting for this move to dismantle 60 Minutes. She named a new producer for 60 Minutes named Nick Bilton after firing really important people who've been associated with 60 Minutes for a long time. And on Monday morning, there was a staff meeting to introduce everybody to Nick Bilton. Nick Bilton was there. He has no real experience at all in news or management. He's a technology journalist. And then he started to read his notes about, I'm here to work for all of you, and it's a great opportunity, new frontiers, blah, blah, blah. Well, Scott Pelley, who has been the icon for 60 Minutes, he's a longtime CBS News journalist. He started grilling Bilton about what was called Black Thursday. And that's the day that really important correspondents were summarily fired. And the executive producer, Tanya Simon. And one of the women who was fired was the one who did the reporting on the terrible conditions in the immigrant detention camps that Bari Weiss did her best to bury. So they were just told, you're done. There was no warning. So Scott Pelley really grilled their supposed new boss, who said, Bari loves this institution. She loves 60 Minutes. And Pelley countered, she's murdering 60 Minutes. She does not love this place. She was brought in to kill it, and she's doing exactly that. And people in that meeting were recording it and passed the audio on to the reporter for Status, which is a really good online newsletter, by the way. In the meeting, Pelley pointed out that Weiss had no qualifications for her job, and told Bilton, you have slender qualifications for this job. And Pelley noted that the changes that have been made to CBS News has been catastrophic for that as well. And it has been.
Yeah.
because their ratings were low, but now they're even lower. So why should we expect any of this is going to be better, Pelley asked Bilton. Bilton tried to move the meeting along. Pelley pressed him, and then Bilton's comeback was, "You're very rude." I mean, it sounds like...
He's a reporter.
You're
Kind of a tautology.
very, very rude. How can you be so rude? It sounds like...
Poor baby.
He sounds like a Victorian grande dame who just noticed that somebody put the cream in first in their tea. Anyhow, the comeback was Pelley saying, "No, I'll tell you what was rude. Black Thursday. That was the absolute definition of rudeness. Telling Tanya Simon she had to be out of here at 5 o'clock. Sending Dragon Mikhailovich to HR to get fired because nobody could look him in the eye. Saying nothing about Tanya's contract, which was not up. And not talking about Sharon Alfonsi's contract. Not talking about Cecilia Vega's contract. Just calling them up and telling them they're fired. That's rude. This is a conversation. That's rude. You were part of that." So this explosion has reverberated throughout, of course, the news business as the single most extraordinary exchange anyone can remember. But certainly it bleeds over into the larger public sphere because this is about very greedy people wanting to have a new purchase go through. Now they're trying to get control of another organization, Warner Discovery. They want that to go through. That would give them control of CNN. Trump hates 60 Minutes. Get rid of 60 Minutes. So that's what this is about. I think it's appalling. I also think it comes at the same week that Stephen Colbert had his last show. And his last week was one that we would expect of him. It was one of joy and dignity and humor and satire. And he is a national treasure, and he is gone for only one reason. And that was the Ellison takeover of CBS.
But they're not going to keep him off the air very long.
No, I think we'll hear more from him, but still, it's not just him, it's the people who work for him.
Yeah,
and,
as he pointed out.
And it's also the nation. I mean, we gained a lot from having him help us get through very dark times with his humor. And in his case, as well as in 60 Minutes, this isn't about a profit-losing enterprise.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with the normal capitalist excuses. We've run out of time for this week, so enjoy the early summer, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.